Friday. Happy Pokemon 150 Fun Day, everybody. I hope you guys are all doing well. Hey, Fanny, what is Pokemon 150 Fun Day? Well, I'm glad you asked. Every single Friday, we are giving away a booster box of Pokemon 151. This is not any longer the most recent set that released in Japan because Ruler of the Dark Flames just recently came out. However, this box is still super expensive. This is the Japanese variant of the Scarlet and Violet 151 set, which comes out September 22nd. And because boxes are so expensive of Pokemon Card 151, and because they're so difficult to get, we're giving away a box every single Friday until Scarlet and Violet 151 releases. So congratulations to this week's winner, Haley TCG. Haley TCG, you are the winner of a new box of Pokemon Card 151. All you have to do is just message me your details, let me know YouTube verification, things like that. You can find me on Instagram at danny.phantump. You can find me on Twitter at danny__o, and you can just email me, dannyphantumpcontent@gmail.com. So that way you can claim your box of Pokemon Card 151. If you want to win one, here's what you have to do. It is super difficult. Tickle that subscribe button down below. Just give it a little poke, and then all you have to do is leave a like and a comment on this video. That's it. Boom. You are entered. Come back next Friday to see if you are the winner. So subscribe, like, comment, boom. That's all that it takes. We're going to get right into things. I'm a little nervous about today's video because there's a lot of information here and I could be way, way off base. But I want to talk about the junk wax era, and I'm really, really excited about this video because there's a lot of data, a lot of math. My brain actually still hurts. Not that it's very big, but it still hurts from trying to compile all this data together and get good estimates on what I think is going to be a fairly accurate assumption of how many specific alternate art cards are in existence. And I think that's important information. Obviously, it's not something that Pokemon is going to deliver to us, but I think it's important information to know for your collectible future, for your value as far as your collectibles go for the future, for the long term, for things like that. I think it's important to look at how many cards were printed because it is an absolute just monstrosity of an amount over the past couple of years. You're talking about over 18 billion Pokemon cards that have been printed over the past couple of years. That makes up about 36% of the Pokemon cards that have ever been printed, and we'll get to that in a minute. However, trying to narrow it down and figure out how many of each rarity, how many of each Pokemon card specifically were printed, because Pokemon doesn't do a numbering scale like what you might see in some sports cards where there's an ultra rare card that might be numbered up to 5 or numbered up to 99, and then you know, oh, this is a 1 of 1 whatever baseball card it is. This is a Otani. This is a 1 of 50, whatever that number might be. And that gives you an idea of how many of that card is in existence. Or Lord of the Rings, Magic the Gathering, the One Ring, there was only 1 of 1 that was ever printed, that was ever in existence. So Pokemon doesn't do anything like that. So this is something that it's like, okay, well, how many, is this Umbreon VMAX really worth $600? How many of them actually are out there? And when you start looking at population reports and you see, okay, there's 2,500 PSA 10s that are in existence now. Well, how many of these copies were actually printed? How many actually exist? And that's an important thing to consider moving forward. And I could be way off base. So if you like this kind of content, if you appreciate this kind of content, or if you think that I'm just off my rocker, please let me know. Share the video. Let me know what you think about this kind of analysis. But before we jump into things, I want to talk about the junk wax era because I wasn't really around for the junk wax era when it came to sports cards and comic books and things like that. And from my understanding of it, in the late 80s, there was this giant influx of just demand where people were kind of flocking to collectibles, to comic books, and to sports cards. And because of that, a lot of different companies were kind of jumping on the bandwagon and printing various sets of sports cards, of baseball cards, of comic books. And since it takes a while to print and make the printers go burr, in the early 90s, mid 90s, you had this junk wax era of baseball cards, sports cards, comic books, because so many different companies were jumping on that bandwagon, seeing dollar signs, and they were like, okay, well, let's print a ton of this stuff because people are going to buy them. They're going to convenience stores, they're going to big box stores, and they're buying all this stuff. And because of that, there was just this mass amount of cards and comic books that were printed during the early and mid 90s. And I remember collecting baseball cards in the mid 90s. I remember going to the store and buying maybe a pack of baseball cards, just looking for my favorite player, a pack pack of basketball cards looking for my favorite basketball player, but never worrying once about value or future values or junk wax or anything like that. But there was just an absolute ton of them that were printed at that time. And there's been a lot of speculation and worriness because Pokemon has printed so many cards over the past couple years. And because of that, a lot of people are thinking, well, because of how much cards they're printing right now, that's going to replicate what happened in the mid-90s with baseball cards, because there were so many cards that were printed that even with saturation over time, those values were never able to recover. And you still have cards of big-time players, rookie cards and things like that, that are just worth pennies because they were printed to oblivion in the early to mid-90s. And a lot of people are worried that, hey, maybe this is something that is going to happen to Pokemon because we printed so much over the past couple years. So let's break it down for a little bit. Obviously, the unfortunate thing with Pokemon is that they do not give us all the necessary information that we need. And obviously, they shouldn't. This is protected information. This is financial information. There's a lot of things that you could utilize to your benefit by them giving out a whole lot of information. So the best thing that we can really do is make educated assumptions and educated guesses based off of the facts and figures that they provide us with and provide their shareholders with, which is totally fine. So this is all public information, but then we take that public information, try and break it down, and try and educate ourselves to make the best decision when it comes to spending our collecting dollars. Now, there's one big difference between Pokemon and what happened in the junk wax era in the mid-90s when it pertains to baseball cards and comic books. First of all, the big difference is there's only one company that prints Pokemon cards, and that is Pokemon. Pokemon is the only one that is going to be able to produce Pokemon cards. So because of that, they can look at demand, study demand, and since Pokemon has always prided themselves on printing to demand, they can back off the printers if they think that is necessary. They can look at a future set release like what they did with Paldea Evolve and say, hey, in the past, the second set of a new generation often doesn't perform as well as the initial set or as a future set. So because of that, we're going to print less. Obviously, Pokemon doesn't want to overprint because they don't want to have a bunch of product that is just sitting on their shelves, but they want to print to make sure that it is available, readily available for everybody to be able to enjoy the hobby, enjoy the game. And because of that, they can back off or restart whenever they see fit. Obviously, during the pandemic, there was a whole lot of other issues that kind of occurred involving printing shortages, employment, things like that, just things that really got in the way of them being able to print to demand at that time. It was a perfect storm that really impacted prices altogether. But Pokemon can print to demand, and since they don't have a ton of other companies producing legal cards, that's it. There's not a whole lot of competition that's going to come into the market that kind of messed things up. During the junk wax era, you had Donruss, you had Score, you had Topps, you had Select, you had Pinnacle, you had all these different sports cards companies, all these different card companies that were out there printing cards where you would just get an influx of cards every single year. So you would have just tons of your favorite player. If you loved Mark McGwire or if you loved Sammy Sosa or Ken Griffey Jr. at the time, you would have the ability to buy all these different companies' variants of that card, of that pack, in hopes to pull that card. And because of that, there was a whole lot of different variants of that specific card that hit the market. So picture this for a second. During the Sword and Shield block, I believe there was 23 different variations of Charizard that came out. So whether it be a promo card or a card that was released in a set that's an ultra rare or just a regular rare, there were 23 different Charizards. I think that's the number. 23 that were printed. That's a lot of Charizards. However, that was spread out over the course of 4 or 5 years. So imagine all 23 of those Charizards coming out in the same few month stretch. Obviously, that is going to destroy the market on Charizards, but also on Pokemon cards because there's so many different cards that are being released at the same time. So that's one big difference, is that Pokemon is the only company that is going to be able to print, so they can study these metrics and determine how much they should be printing in the future. The other big difference is that Pokemon does have an extremely successful trading card game that involves competitive play associated with it. Now, there was some attempts at making baseball cards competitive and different things like that that were done during the junk wax era, but nothing that ever really took off. But Pokemon continues to keep growing. There are breaking records at major events. The World Championships this year, that's taking place next month in Yokohama, Japan, is going to feature probably the biggest playing field that we've ever seen before, and then it's expected to just continue to rise through next season. So because they have a competitive game that is carrying their cards forward, forward, there's always going to be a need for Pokemon cards from sets, even though the sets have ballooned to sizes that are probably inappropriate now, where there's 250 cards in a set, 300 cards in a set. It's getting really ridiculous, and I do believe that's what's caused the crash of bulk. So if you want to talk about commons and uncommons in a junk wax era, that's totally fine, but there is going to need to be a lot of cards that are going to be pulled out for that competitive field that is going to play an impact as far as value goes. So those are the two main differences as far as what I can see according to the junk wax era. So I do believe that Pokemon has overprinted a lot of cards based off of the fact that there's too many commons and uncommons in the set, and even too many ultra rares in some sets like Chilling Reign, like Evolving Skies, which makes things a little bit more difficult. Pull rates obviously seeming to be terrible in those sets because there's just this mass overproduction of cards in general. However, I wouldn't necessarily call it a junk wax era because Pokemon can kind of, they can determine how many cards they want to print, and you also have this big competitive game that is going to help right the ship if that time comes. There's still demand for Pokemon cards out there. There's still a lot of sets that are high in demand. You might go to big box stores and you might see a fair amount of Pokemon cards that are available, but there's still people who are going out buying them. There's still sometimes you'll go to the store and you might not see that many Pokemon cards available, or that much of a newer set that's not available. You can't find any Evolving Skies. The demand is still there for a lot of people, still cracking a lot of products. So because of that, not a ton of product that's just sitting on shelves for months at a time like what we saw with the junk wax era. So let's talk about the amount of cards that were printed with Pokemon, and this is where we get into this huge amount of math that is out there. So like I said, Pokemon doesn't give us a whole lot of information when it comes to the amount of cards that were printed. We do know that in 2021 there was 9.1 billion, yes, that's a B, billion cards that were printed. In 2022, they upped that amount to 9.7 billion cards. Now, this is the most amount of cards that have ever been printed in the history of Pokemon. However, we don't get exact information of what determines a Pokemon card. And for relevancy purposes, if an energy card counts as a Pokemon card, if a code card counts as a Pokemon card, that's not really relevant for this. However, it might be relevant for future information if we so decide to kind of go down another rabbit hole or something like that. However, what we have is information of roughly 53 billion cards that have ever been printed for Pokemon. Now, again, we don't get the information on if that includes the Wizards of the Coast era or if that is just Nintendo. Since Nintendo is releasing this information, my best assumption is that this is just Nintendo information. So this would not include the Wizards of the Coast era. So unfortunately, we don't really have good, accurate information on how much base cards were printed, fossil cards were printed, jungle cards were printed, or cards that were printed in the late 90s. And if we did, that would be super beneficial to kind of determine future indicators on what value can be expected down the road, because we could compare the early release of vintage to the current modern state. Since there was so much demand during the pandemic, that would somewhat equal what we saw when Pokemon was originally released a couple months after release, when Pokemon really started blowing up. So what we do know is that there's been roughly 53 billion cards that have been printed since Nintendo took over. That's our assumption. 9.1 billion printed in 2021, 9.7 printed in 2022. That means over the past 2 years, you're looking at about 18.8 billion cards that have been printed, which is way more than Pokemon has ever printed before. So since the early 2000s, this makes up roughly 35% of the amount of Pokemon cards that have ever been printed, which is a huge, staggering number. And you can look at the numbers in the past years. You're looking at roughly 2 billion a year, something around that line. So you're looking at about 4 or 5 times the amount of Pokemon cards that were printed in 21 and 22 as opposed to what they typically print on a yearly basis. So how can we determine how many alternate arts of each copy, or how many copies of each alternate art are actually in existence? Well, all we can do is make assumptions on some different levels, because we don't really know what percentage is being printed in the English language and what percentage is being printed in foreign languages. Obviously, Japanese is going to take a decent chunk of that market share, and then there's like 10, 11 other countries that are going to get a small portion of that printing. So just to try and keep things as simple as possible. We assume, we're making assumptions, and you can correct me if you think that this number is way off base, but I'm taking the assumption that 70% of the cards that were printed in 2021 and 70% of the cards that were printed in 2022 were printed as English copies. And that means that leaves 30% over for foreign copies. So that would break down to 6.37 billion English cards that were printed in 2021 and 6.8 billion English cards that were printed in 2022. So roughly 2.7 and roughly 3 billion foreign cards respectively in 2021, 2022. So we need to figure out that English card rate so that way we can determine how many of each set were being printed. And this is, again, total guesses. This is all we can really do. But we do know Pokemon doesn't typically reprint things until an announcement comes. And because things were so popular in 2021 and 2022, we know that really in 2021, the only sets that were really reprinted, they put some focus on Hidden Fates. They probably put a little bit of focus on Unified Minds, a little bit of focus on Unbroken Bonds, because those got small, very, very small reprints. Same thing with Ultra Prism. So what we have to do is we have to take basically a market share of each set that's released. Now, Shining Fates came out in early 2021. So, since Pokemon typically print sets like 4 or 5 months in advance, the majority of Shining Fates cards was already probably printed in 2020, which is why you had such a shortage of Shining Fates in existence, because the demand had blown up. Pokemon didn't have time to foresee that demand because of everything that was going on because of the pandemic, and they were only able to print so many Shining Fates products, which is why they announced, hey guys, hold the phone for a second. We're going to come back and we're going to print a lot more to make sure that we meet demand, but you're going to have to be patient. It takes a while for us to print cards. So because of that, we're assuming in 2021 that Shining Fates took up roughly 5% of the market share, which is about 318 million cards, 318.5 million cards of the 6.37 billion cards that were printed in 2021. Stay with me. I know this is going to be a lot of math, but I'll try my best to explain it as best as I possibly can, and you can tell me in the comment section how nutso I am. Battle styles. We're going to break down main series set releases to assume, okay, 15% of every single, or 15% of the market share is going to go to every single main series set release that released in 2021 outside of Celebration. Celebrations is assumed to be, the most popular set of 2021. If we're the Pokemon company, we're going to print the most of Celebrations. So we're going to give 20% to Celebrations. So this makes up 100%, or 6.37 billion English cards that we're assuming were printed in 2021. We do have a random section down here that is going to be that 15% there. That's going to make up that Hidden Fates reprint. That's going to make up your random promo cards. That's going to make up your energy blocks. I'm just associating a 15% basically main series set release size to randomness that's going to happen throughout printing of 2021. So we're assuming 955,500,000 Battle Styles Pokemon cards were printed in 2021. Same thing with Chilling Reign, same thing with Evolving Skies, same thing with Fusion Strike, which was the last set to release in 2021. So then you have to figure out, okay, well, how many packs does that mean were printed? Well, let's take this number and divide it by 11, because we're assuming, hey, there's energy cards in here, there's code cards in here, and to be safe, we're going to assume those energy cards count as part of this 9.1 billion cards that were printed. I wanted to be as conservative as I possibly could on this number, so that way we could try and get as close to an estimate as we possibly could. So Shining Fates, roughly 29 million packs that were printed. When it comes to Battle Styles, which would have more of a market share, Chilling Reign, Evolving Skies, and Fusion Strike, you're looking at roughly 87 million packs that were printed in 2021. Now this number could be way off, but this is assuming 70% of that market share of that 9.1 billion cards that were printed, 70% were printed in English, and based off of these percentages of market share for those sets. Celebrations, obviously a much different set, only 4 cards per booster pack, so because of that, it's going to have a lot more packs, 318,500,000 packs assumed printed in 2021. Now, 2022 makes things a whole lot more difficult, because there were reprints that happened in 2022, Pokemon was able to look back and say, hey, this isn't enough product to meet demand. So because of that, we're going to print a lot more in 2022. So that changes things a whole lot. So here are your set releases in 2022. You have Brilliant Stars, Astral Radiance, Pokemon Go, Lost Origin, and Silver Tempest. So Silver Tempest we knew was underprinted a little bit compared to more previous sets. So we're giving 10% of the 2022 market share to Silver Tempest. So 10% of the 6.79 billion we're assuming go to Silver Tempest. We're going to associate 12% with each of the 22 main series set releases: Lost Origin, Pokemon Go, Astral Radiance, and Brilliant Star. So a little bit less than what we saw in 2021, but that's because Pokemon had to make up for Shining Fates and then had to reprint a lot of these other sets because sets like Evolving Skies had so many issues. Sets like Chilling Reign had a massive reprint. Fusion Strike, Battle Styles, these all had massive reprints. So they had to associate some of that market share with reprints from 2021. So what does that mean? Well, that means that roughly, if these percentages are somewhat accurate, we know that 7% got associated with Shining Fates because they wanted to print more to make sure that they met demand. So 475 million cards printed for Shining Fates. Now, this isn't going to include anything that they printed in 2020, which is when they were going to do their big print run of Shining Fates. This is just reprints that they kind of threw at us because there was not enough product to meet demand. Battle Styles were associating 3%. Chilling Reign were associating 3%. Those were a little bit older sets. Evolving Skies had to have 4 different print runs to try and meet demand, so we're associating 7% with that one. Celebrations 5%. Fusion Strike 5%. And then randomness roughly 12%. So about 814 million cards we're not associating with any of these sets. We're just assuming, okay, promo cards, extra cards, whatever the case may be. We want to take that out of the pot so that way we can be super conservative with our assumption of how many of each alternate art have been printed. Hopefully, this is all making sense. So what does that mean? Well, that means you're looking at roughly 18.5 million booster packs of Chilling Reign that were printed in 2022 and 87 million booster packs of Chilling Reign that were printed in 2021. And if you look at 2022 sets, same thing. We're really only breaking down the alternate arts for the 2021 sets because 2022, there's still sets that are being printed in 2023, so that's going to impact things. But this gives you an idea of basically how the math works, so you can do this on your own if you so choose. But associating 12% with all these main series sets means about 815 million cards, or about 74 million booster packs of Brilliant Stars, Astral Radiance, Pokemon Go, Lost Origin, and Silver Tempest. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at these numbers up here, the total number of packs that were printed between 2021 and 2022 that make up these main series sets. For the most part, we're only going to be talking about Battle Styles, Chilling Reign, Evolving Skies, and Fusion Strike, because those are the 4 sets that are going to have alternate arts in them that then we can determine, okay, how rare are these actual alternate arts? And thankfully, we have been tracking pull rate data for years. So that way we can take an entirety of Sword and Shield pull rate data from the entire block of Sword and Shield to give us an accurate understanding of what pull rates look like for full arts and for secret rares. So if we associate pull rates only to be based off of rarity and not individualized, like I don't think Umbreon VMAX is harder to pull than Rayquaza VMAX. I think they have the exact same pull rate. You just have to look at some gigantic sample size of probably close to 1 million packs in order to get a firm understanding of that, because I don't believe in unique card pull rates. I don't think Pokemon does any numbering like that. I think they only associate pull rates with rarity. So because of that, alternate arts would be included with full arts. Alternate art VMAXs would be included with secret rares. So throughout the entirety of the battle styles all the way up through Silver Tempest pull rates, you're looking at secret rares being 1 out of every 34 packs. So roughly 1 per box, you're going to get a secret rare. Not an alternate art, but a secret rare. Could be a gold item, could be a rainbow rare, could be an alternate art. But as far as a secret rare goes, alternate art VMAX, 1 out of every 34 packs for a secret rare. Full art could be an Umbreon V, but it also could be an Aroma Lady. It could be just a Dragonite V full art. 1 out of 25. So 1 out of every 25 packs. And that's important to know, because now we have the total number of packs that were printed in 2021 and 2022. So you're looking at roughly 105 million Battle Styles packs, 105 million Chilling Reign packs, 130 million Evolving Skies packs, and 117 million Fusion Strike packs. So then we have to figure out how many secret rares and how many full arts there are for each of these sets, for Battle Styles, for Evolving Skies, for Chilling Reign, and for Fusion Strike. So why that's important is because what we want to do is we want to figure out how many secret rares and full arts there are in existence, and assuming they all have the same pull rate for set, that will tell us how many copies of an Umbreon VMAX were printed in 21 and in 2022. So if we're assuming that it's 1 out of every 25 packs to pull a full art, what we're going to do is we're going to take the total number of packs that were printed in Battle Styles, and we're going to divide that by 25, because it's 1 out of every 25. That means total there is going to be 4,215,273 full arts that were printed for Battle Styles. If we look at secret rares, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to divide this by 34, because we know it's 1 out of every 34 packs roughly is what it's going to take us to find a secret rare in Battle Styles. So we're going to take that total number of packs, that 105 million, we're going to divide that by 34, and that means we're going to have roughly 3.1 million secret rares that were printed for Battle Styles. So then we will take that number divided by the amount of full arts that were printed in Battle Styles. So in Battle Styles, there were 22 full arts that were printed. So if we're assuming pull rates are the same for rarity and just basing pull rates off of rarity, if we take 4.2 million packs that are 4.2 million full arts that were printed and divide that by the amount of full arts in the set, that gives you 191,603 copies of each full art that were printed. Well, there's 4 alternate arts in the set for Battle Styles. So assuming those 4 alternate arts, so we've got both Urshifus, and then we've got Empoleon, and then we've got Tyranitar. It is safe to say, as long as you are calculating pull rates based off of rarity, there is going to be 191,603 Empoleon alternate arts, Rapid Strike Urshifu, Single Strike Urshifu, and Tyranitar V that were printed between the years of 2021 and 2022. If you look at alternate art VMAX, there's only 2 in the set. So since we put those in with the secret rares, and we look at pull rates for secret rares being 1 out of every 34, there is a total of 20 secret rares in Battle Styles. So we take this 3.1 million divided by 20. That would mean that there's 155 or 154,973 copies of each secret rare in Battle Styles that were printed in 2021 and 2022. Chilling Reign, a little bit different. There's a whole lot more secret rares and full arts that are in existence. So if we look at the amount of packs that were printed for Chilling Reign, 105 million, we figure out, okay, well, let's divide that by our pull rates, 1 out of every 25. That means that there's going to be 4,215,273 full arts that were printed. Same thing with secret rares, 3,099,465 secret rares that were printed, but now we have higher numbers that we're going to divide that by. Since there's 39 different full arts in Chilling Reign, that means that there's 108,000 copies of each full art. Since there's 35 secret rares in Chilling Reign, that set was just massive. That means there's 88,556 copies of each secret rare. So 88,556 Snorlax Gold cards that were printed between 21 and 22, but also 88,556 Blaziken VMAX that were printed between 21 and 2022. If you look at Evolving Skies, we know there was 38 different full arts in Evolving Skies, 34 different secret rares in Evolving Skies. You're looking at a little bit more packs that were printed for Evolving Skies because they did have that 4th print run. So a total of 130 million packs. If you divide that by the pull rates, you're looking at roughly 5.2 million full arts that were printed, 3.8 million secret rares that were printed. You take that and divide it by the amount of full arts in the set and the amount of secret rares in the set, that means you're looking at roughly 137,000 Umbreon Vs that were printed. 137,000 Dragonite Vs that were printed, both alternate arts, because 137,000 of every single full art would equal this 5.2 million full arts that were printed for Evolving Skies. So when you're looking at how many Umbreon VMAXs are out there, well, we can kind of assume in 2021, 2022, there was roughly 112,520 Umbreon VMAX that were printed. Same thing with Fusion Strike, 20 full arts, 20 secret rares. You divide that by the amount of full arts that were printed and secret rares that were printed. So you're looking at roughly 235,455 of each full art, and then 173,128 of each secret rare in Fusion Strike. So there's a lot of information here. Obviously, these numbers could be completely crazy. And the important thing to remember is that while these numbers may seem a little bit bigger than you initially anticipated, there is a lot of sealed product that still hasn't been cracked, a lot of sealed product that is sitting in storage sheds, a lot of market saturation that is going to happen over time. So these numbers might be low, but this also isn't taking into consideration the amount of cards that were printed after, in 2023, later on, or even prior to where they might have started on battle styles a little bit earlier. This is just making the assumption of taking the amount of cards Pokemon gave us, and that's the only accurate information that we know for sure, and then starting to build off of, okay, well, we calculated pull rates through all these sets. Let's try and figure out how many of each card by associating a market share with them all. It's just very interesting, and I hope you guys find it interesting, and I probably lost a lot of people, but this is the math and how it all breaks down. I will try putting this spreadsheet in my Discord so that way people can kind of play with it and look at it and things like that. But I'm really curious to get your feedback and what you think, trying to determine and pinpoint how many of each alternate arts or how many of each rarity are in existence. And a lot of this is just guesswork, assuming that there are no unique pull rates in Pokemon, that pull rates are only determined by rarity, and then taking that and then dividing it by all the cards that were printed and things like that. I hope you guys liked the information. It took me a lot of time. It was a giant headache to try and compile all this, so I hope you guys enjoy it. And I could be way off, but I really wanted to kind of start the ball rolling and get feedback and see what you guys think. So let me know in the comments section down below. Feel free to join the discussion on Discord. Share the video. Hopefully we can figure out something to do, right? It's something cool to look at. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to me ramble for way too long. I will check back with you guys on Sunday with another video. Until then,